I love and I'm passionate, and you will see me sitting on the edge of my chair when I'm talking about media and stuff. So 30 years in media and still
Yeah,
feeling
and we
like
actually met in Europe at Web Summit and did a podcast together. So it kind of all comes around the same way, which is great. So tell me a little bit about Poddster and tell me what you're building. I'm just going to let you talk about it.
Poddster is actually studios for filming podcasts, and everybody would say, "Oh, what's so special there?" But believe it or not, there are not too many specialized studios for filming podcasts in the world. Not only in Singapore or Dubai or wherever. So it all started when Vuk, the co-founder, and I were hosting our own podcast. We said, okay, we're now producing our own podcast. Shall we offer it to the companies? We offered that to the companies. And it didn't work, but the company started asking, can we film in your studio? And we said, yeah, okay, you can. How much can you charge? I said, okay, $100 per, because we had everything. Everything was there. You know, like
all the gear, you had all the mics, you had all the everything, the lights and everything.
Everything.
All high quality, I'm
April
sure.
2022, we had 2 bookings in our studio because it was not a business then. It was just us helping some brands film in our studio. Fast forward a year later, because more and more and more people asked about the podcasting and opportunities, 200, or to be exact, 196 hours of in April 2023 were leased, let's say, in that studio for filming podcasts. And the waiting list was more than a month. Then we said, oh, we need more studios. We built 2 more. Oh, in 2 weeks, those are full. We built 2 more studios. And on and on. Now in Dubai, where everything started, we have 7 studios.
So these are 7 studios in Dubai where somebody can come in and rent it for an hour, do a podcast with a bunch of friends or a bunch of coworkers, and walk away with a completed podcast?
Exactly.
How much does it cost for an hour?
$120 now.
That's it?
That's it. And we have amazing space. If you go to podster.com or singapore.podster.com, you will see Singapore studios.
Well, wait a minute. We're talking about Dubai.
Yeah.
You've got 5, 6, 7 in Dubai.
Yes.
But now you're in Singapore.
Yes.
Okay,
Because
talk about
we have a business presence in Singapore for 5 or 6 years. We understand the market. We love the market, to be very honest. And then we said, okay, let's start studios here because people want to film podcasts here. So personally, at my home, I have 3 or 4 cameras, A7, S3, which is the most common camera used by everybody's nodding their head. Yeah, the best one. But we have a Canon as a sponsor in one of the studios, so I cannot glorify that much. So anyhow, I have it at home. I can do podcast literally at home. I have lights, I have microphones, I have cameras. But what I don't have, and what I'm getting in the studio, is a convenience. As you said, walk in, film, say goodbye. So here in Singapore studios, we have FX30 cameras, which is everybody's nodding head. Everybody knows what the Creator movie was filmed with that camera.
They're good cameras.
Amazing movie, great cameras from Sony, and so we have those, and you come in for 150, 170 Sing dollars an hour, and you get amazing quality for that amount of money. We all know that hiring a DSLR decent level videographer in Singapore cannot be under 1,000 Singapore dollars, and here for 150. So it's not a selling point, it's just a convenience of filming, and not to mention the space, which is really beautiful.
Where is the space in Singapore?
Near IKEA, Alexandra. So very nice area. Some filming studios there already, but this is the first one, and the Singapore is the second city, because when we started in Dubai, there was no podcasting studio in Dubai. Now, as far as we know, there are no dedicated, please correct me if I'm wrong, but there are no dedicated podcasting studios in Singapore yet. And this should start an avalanche, because now in Dubai you have 5 or 7 studios, which I'm proud to say many of them copied us, which we are proud that people are liking what we are doing.
So podcast studio, go in there, $150 for an hour, record walk away. Are you just walking away with an audio and a video file, or are you adding any services on top of that?
That's additional service which you don't have to take, but you can. I think that everybody knows here for Adobe Premiere podcast mixer. I don't know whether if you know the addition to Premiere, which is an AI which edits podcasts like this in 10 or 20 seconds. Yeah, there are some notes there. Those guys know, so ask them. So yeah, we can offer the service if you don't want to bother with that. But a lot of people coming into our studios are passion projects that care for each and every dollar spent and so on. So this is my advice to them. But if you don't have time, if you still want to be more convenient, we have a full range of services that you can use, like editing, clipping, taking the micro content, posting, even creating social media. We have a huge success with several podcasts that we fully produced and so on. And I'm sure with the Hubhopper we'll have amazing collaboration because I just spoke with Gautam. It's really amazing what they do.
Yeah, Gautam coming up next, and I think I'm going to take a cut of any business you do. So talk about the community that you build as well, because it's not just a place where you come in, speak your podcast, and leave, but you're also seeing communities develop around podcasters in the facilities.
I think that everybody knows that community is everything. Today, in this day and age where we live, everything is about the community. And just a question, I told you, we had 2 bookings in April 2022. We had 100 bookings, but remember, some of them are repeating, so they were not original, like different people booking, So just by raise of hand, or maybe you can shout, how many podcasts do you think is filmed in our studios in Dubai?
What,
you
every week or every month or every
No,
year?
how many podcasters in total
How many podcasters
use our studios in Dubai? And Dubai is 3 million, like
3 million people in Dubai. Yeah. How many people come? How many people think it's 100? Raise your hand. 1,000. 500.
500, okay. Do we hear more? Sorry.
This says 1,000. How many?
More than 1,000 different podcasters.
Wow.
Not episodes, not shows, not 1,000 different podcasters come to studio. So also we were discussing just a little bit before. No, we didn't start by exploring the market, doing due diligence,
like
or whatever. We just people asked us, "Can we film in your studio?" It grew, and now we have more than 1,000 people. Nobody knew. If we didn't know, nobody knew that there is such a big market behind it. And let's talk next year about Poddster Studios, because we just started here a month ago.
Sounds good. So I was going to say, what's the next city for you? But real quickly, just name one.
I don't know. New Delhi sounds
okay, Delhi. All right, I'm going to bring Gautam up. Thank you. Ivan will be back, and we'll ask him some questions. And we're going to talk a little bit about what you're up to. So tell me a little bit about what you're building.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, thanks for coming.
How are you? Thank you, guys. Thank you for being here. So I run Hubhopper. We are Asia's largest podcast management, distribution, and analytics platform. Since a large amount of this, a large amount of the people here are very familiar with the music space. If you guys know what a TuneCore does, I mean, we've got Akhila sitting here, so she, of course, does. So how TuneCore essentially disseminates your music across 150 different platforms. We do the same thing for podcasts. Every podcast needs to have a DNA created, which a hosting platform does. So the hosting platform creates the RSS feed that's then used to broadcast your podcast. That's what Hubhopper does.
Okay, so how'd you start? You have a real origin story that's actually kind of entertaining.
Our origin story is hilarious, actually. I was on a very different career trajectory. I was working at, I think I managed to pick the most boring job in the world. I managed to find it. So I was a corporate banker doing risk and research analysis for a very specific segment of chemical companies for Barclays. So it was I'd really picked this really boring career.
Any bankers here want to say how great banking is? I worked in banking early in my career too. In check processing, it was boring. Go ahead.
So to add insult to injury, what the bank had done is it had put up all these different firewalls to not allow you to access content whilst I was there. So I needed to figure out a consumption of something, otherwise I would die of boredom. And I stumbled upon podcasts as a way to upskill myself at work, and completely fell in love with the medium. Like Alice in Wonderland, I was just falling deeper and deeper into this space. And before I knew it, I was consuming about 14 hours of content a day. Not an exaggeration, because I sleep while listening to content. I can't sleep in silence.
So you're consuming 24 hours of media a day. I love that. All right, I have a quick question. So, and then from there, you're like, wow, and then I need to build this.
Yeah.
So your platform, you're in India, you're in Asia, big in Asia, US as well. But one of the misconceptions I think that I had on podcasts with this, it's developing world stuff. It's going to be, Europe, and it's going to be Singapore, and it's going to be the US. But that podcasts, and you opened my eyes to this, podcasts are big everywhere. Talk about the opportunity for podcasts and what you're going after in places outside of, I guess, the first and second world.
Yeah, so I actually think that a large part of why people believe podcasts is very specific for the West is because it's from the word itself. The word podcast is a derivative of the word iPod and broadcast. So for a large amount of time, people associated podcasts with Apple products. But podcasts are essentially just an umbrella term for all non-music audio content, which is done exceedingly well across various different regions for near about 100 years. So market like, for example, I can give the Indian example. We've had copious amounts of people consuming storytelling content and devotion content on repeat for the last 30, 40 years now. So they're at least 3-4 decades now. And all podcasts are essentially doing is educating people of how they can replace their offline consumption patterns of this type of content to online. And now the terminology you have to adopt is podcast, because that's just the terminology.
That's the word.
knows.
It's like Kleenex or TiVo.
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, for people standing out there, come on and take a seat. There are lots of seats. For those of you who are wondering about the localization session, we're running about 15 minutes late. So you'll love the end of the podcasting session, and then we'll jump into that. So thanks, everybody, for being a part of it. Seats up here, seats over here in the center if you want us to stare at you. No, we're not. We won't bite. Okay, so what type of podcasters do you generally work with?
So our platform is an open platform that anybody can come and create through. So we distribute approximately 30,000 podcasters shows across 120 countries, and we basically they create about 220,000 podcast episodes through our platform, which are hosted from us. So I can tell you what type of content is being created and does the best. So for example, devotion content leads the pack across emerging markets in terms of what is consumed the most. Then self-development, self-growth content does exceedingly well. Post that point, true crime is something that does well across the world. And then you've got romantic or synonymous to romantic erotica content that does really well in audio. So these are your 4 categories that if you are sticking with any one of these 4, you're pretty much in good stead.
Yeah, that sounds good. So what you guys specifically do, and I just want to make sure it's clear, is I'm a podcaster. I go to Ivan's studio. I create a podcast. You'll then basically package it up and distribute it to all the places where people listen, right?
Yeah.
So what's that process like? When you get that podcast, what do you add to it before you send it to Spotify or the other places where it goes?
So basically, our platform is all in one. So you can do your final edits on our platform as well. So you've got your raw file. You can edit your podcast. Post that point, you can distribute. So you just have to pick the platforms that you wish to go live on. You'll get your podcast automatically going live in those platforms. Then you get your analytics. So you get to see where people are consuming, how they're consuming. You can create your podcast websites, embed players, and you can now, leveraging AI, you can do a whole lot of different stuff by creating your social posts. You can create your audiograms. You can create your blurbs that you need to essentially use across different avenues. So the objective essentially being that once you've done the amazing work that you do at Ivan Studios, you can come to a platform like Hubhopper, and the rest of your podcasting journey, all the way to marketing and monetizing your podcast, you get to do under one platform itself.
Got it. And how much do you charge for this?
So it starts all the way from the lowest plan will be from $12 a month, where you can upload 5 episodes per month, all the way up to plans that are at $450, $500 for enterprises. So for individual, that's $12, $39, and $99, depending on the number of episodes and the features you want.
And does that pricing change in different parts of the world, or is it flat everywhere?
Currently, it's only changing between the West and the East. So if you're accessing it from Singapore, then you're getting the same rates that you'd be getting in India.
What if I was doing it in Indonesia?
Then you're still getting the same rates. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so slide over. Come on up, Ivan. We're going to talk a little bit about podcasting in general. Podcasting's the next great creator format. Everybody says that, but it's really actually been around for a while, right? Is it a resurgence we're seeing now, or what's happening in the state of podcasting?
So I started my first audio podcast 7 or 8 years ago, where the tools like Hubhopper were not available at all, and I just started it just to see how it works, because I'm in media. I can offer that to my clients and so on. So audio podcasts and then video podcasts. But you know what happened early this year or late last year? YouTube took over Spotify as the most watched podcasting platform. So people want to see. No matter it's easier if you can choose between audio and video. So definitely, I think that the podcasts are here to stay. They're just starting.
Yeah, well, and podcasts just starting, but it's been going on for a long time. I was doing video podcasts back in 2006, 2007. So you're doing video, right? What's your sense of the state of podcasting these days?
You're asking, you're pointing at a very important. So podcasting has been around for about 2 decades now. The terminology was coined in 2005 with Adam Curry and a couple of different folks. And actually, a lot of people think that now there's the advent of video. Podcasting actually started with video and audio podcasts. Then video was lost, and now video is being found again. I think when people say that podcasting has been around for a while, yes, it was a subculture till 2017. There were only 0.4 million podcasts that were created from 2006 to 2017. Only 0.4 in the history of podcasts. Then from 2017, music platforms adopted podcasts as well. So it went from 0.4 million to 4.5 million between 2017 to 2022. And now you're looking at progression being geometric. So in the last 90 days, there have been 500,000 podcasts created. So on a base of 5 million podcasts that have been created in the history of podcasts since it ever began, in the last 90 days, 500,000 podcasts have been created.
All right, how many people have a podcast? A couple of you guys do. Okay. You all should, obviously.
Okay, how many people want to have or have an idea about having a podcast?
Yeah, see, or your company or other places. That's awesome. All right, so tell me, how did Spotify screw up so badly? I mean, they were here, they're gone, they're here, they're gone. What did they do wrong?
They don't have a video. They don't have a video. But you know, they did what they did in 2016 and 17. They started buying off or acquisition of a lot of companies. Whoever was doing anything about podcasts, like your company now, they would acquire and so on. They spend a lot of money, and then this first big deal with Joe Rogan, 100 million, just to have a premiere on the Spotify, went crazy. They're doing just fine, but people like to see people.
What do you think about it, Gautam?
So I've got a couple of points with regards to Spotify. One is I'll never take away the amount that Spotify has actually done for the space and bringing it into the mainstream, because fine, they made a couple of investments and put steroids into this industry prior to when it needed to, but they brought podcasting into everybody's attention or mainframe. So one thing was that, so why did it happen? So everybody knows that music streaming platforms, it's a very difficult business. They've got 2 main places where they spend money. They spend money in user acquisition and retention, and the second place they spend money is in the license fees they need to pay every time a song is streamed. Now the problem was that every time you would play a song, it would cost them so much money, between 8 to 10 cents, that they needed to come up with a differentiated strategy. So they launched podcasts, because when you first play a podcast in Spotify, you don't need to pay a music label or anybody, so to speak. So it gave them diversity of content in an otherwise homogeneous market, and they were saving a lot of money on the unit economic level. This worked very well for them in Germany. They made it into a global strategy, and they finally believed that they had found the answer to saving money with in their operations. So they made a couple of acquisitions, and then what started to happen is, was an acquisition race that happened between iHeart, Sirius, and Spotify. So one would acquire, then the other one would say, my muscles are bigger, and they would acquire. Then the other one would say that my muscles are bigger. So what actually happened was, Spotify didn't screw up. It got caught up in a race where $3.5 billion was spent in an industry that was making less money as an entire industry in 18 months.
Yeah, so let's set us back a little bit. Okay, guys, we have like 7 minutes left, so we're going to do some quick questions here. I want to talk about AI and get into AI. So how is AI changing podcasting right now? Gautam, really quickly, give me like a sentence or two.
It's making the process from 4 hours long to half an hour long, because now you don't need to make your show notes yourself. You don't need to even localize to different languages using products like 11 Labs, phenomenal. You don't need to make audiograms. You can edit the background noise removal. You can use a couple of Adobe's products. So it simplifies everybody's experience to the degree and of how a calculator made everybody's life a lot easier in the 60s. So I just look at AI in the same way that people look at calculators or looked at calculators back then. It's
Yep,
not
absolutely.
Yeah.
What about you, Ivan?
From the production point of view, what Gautam mentioned, definitely, I don't know whether if you know, but there is one free amazing tool from Adobe for sound only that clears your sound. So you can record it with a phone 3 meters from yourself, and then when you put it through this Adobe Podcast AI enhancer, you get it like a studio quality sound, and it's free. Then up to, I don't know, 10 hours, I think, a month or something like that. Then there is also a Premiere cutting tool, which I mentioned, which is $39 a month. And it really gives you amazing opportunity to produce podcasts very quickly. And then for the preparation of the podcast, now when I'm going to meet Jim to have a podcast, obviously busy, traveling all the time and so on, I don't have time. I literally turn on ChatGPT and start talking with ChatGPT while I'm driving to the podcast studio, asking him about Jim Louderback, who is he, what is he doing, what are the amazing achievements with his newsletter he did or whatever. And at the end, I said to ChatGPT, okay, craft me a 20 questions. And when I get
This
into
is
the
why
studio...
I don't drive in Dubai, by the way, because he's on the road doing this. All right, I've got a couple of quick tools for you also. The studio sound you talked about at Adobe is great. Descript is a great editor that allows you to put your podcast in their video or audio and lets you edit it like it was a word processor. They also have the studio sound plugin similar to what they do, which audio is so important. It makes everything sound better. And then Opus Clip lets you clip things up. Okay, a lot of people here want to start podcasts. We're going to end this session by talking a little bit about tips. And those of you who are here for our localization, we're going to begin that in 5 minutes because we're all running a little bit late. Okay, Gautam, top tip for somebody who wants to start a podcast today. What do they do?
I would say take the top 3 ideas that you have. See if you can come up with 10 titles for any one of them. The one that you can come up with the most titles for. Don't think too much. Go on to Riverside or go on to a platform like Squadcast. Record. Don't feel like you need to share it with the world. Everybody has something called podcastination, where they fear starting a podcast. In the beginning,
Podcastination.
Yeah.
I love that.
So
Okay, that's the word of the day.
Yeah. So then basically only share it with a few of your friends. You can create a private podcast on platforms like Hubhopper, small plug in there as well. So you don't need to share it with everybody. And once you feel comfortable enough, there's a difference between a podcast launch and a market launch. Everybody thinks that they're the same thing. Your podcast launch can only be shared with the 5 people that you trust and 5 people that you're comfortable with. Once you reach a particular stage, then you can start sharing it with more people. The world is not going to humiliate you for your first episode.
I like that. I like that. Okay, what about you? Good tip for someone starting out.
I would just want to agree with him 100%. And from the engineering point of view, please take those notes and those checkpoints because they are really, really important. What I would tell you, come to our studio, let's hang out, let's talk about it. We will have meetups because our creatives, like we like to hang out and talk to people. The good ideas will come out. And also one advice, believe it or not, you don't have to have a guest in your podcast. You can talk yourself, or you can have a co-host, which is always amazing, which you did
I was doing with Renee, yeah.
Renee, yeah,
Who's
for
now
a
working
long
with
time.
Fred over
Yeah.
there.
So definitely that's the thing. So yeah, take time and chill and talk to people, and it will come out.
Okay, how long should it be? What's the ideal length?
You know what? There is no ideal length. If you can be as energetic, as interesting as Jim, you can have 3 hours or 4 hours of podcast. If you are shy and you are podcrastinating, or you want to start, do 5 minutes podcast, do 10 minutes podcast. It's just enough. Just to as long as you're having something interesting to say, it's enough.
Got him. What's the right length?
20 minutes.
20 minutes. I love it.
Engineering.
I love it. It's like, yeah, whatever you want. He's like 20 minutes. Just do 20 minutes. So you said no hosts. You don't have to have guests.
I have one podcast. I booked 2 hours of the studio, and I filmed 4 podcasts in 2 hours, like 25, 30 minutes per episode. Yeah.
What's a podcasting secret that people don't know? What's that one secret you're like, hey, guess what? Go ahead, Ivan.
You will not know what you are doing on the first episode, second episode, third episode, fifth episode. On the 10th episode, you will know more about podcasting that all the experts know, and your podcasting specifically. So don't wait for the answers to come. Start and learn by doing, and you will feel. I have so many examples in our studio. People didn't know. You don't have all that. Just start.
Just start. Just start. What about you, Gautam?
Okay, so I'll tell you.
List first.
Yeah. So a couple of secrets. When you're making your show notes aren't actually meant for human beings. They're meant for search engines. So everybody writes their show notes like they're meant for people. They're not. So you have to write them with specific keywords in mind so that they're indexed in the right manner. It's going to make your the uptake of your podcast a lot better. A lot of people will launch their podcast and they don't land up in the right number of DSPs. You need to make sure that if your podcast is going to be successful, that you're in as many platforms as possible. So keep a massive eye on that in terms of the number of platforms that you're on. The number of platforms is directly correlated to how well your podcast is going to do. Number 3 is launch your podcast on either a Wednesday or a Sunday.
A Wednesday or a Sunday. Okay,
yeah.
That's good. I'd like to thank Ivan. I'd like to thank Gautam.
you.
You guys are going to be around. Big round of applause for these guys.